Okay. Okay, we're recording. So, hello, my name is Anna Brewer, and I'm the Homeless Voices for Justice team leader. Homeless Voices for Justice is a grassroots organization organized by people who are or have experienced homelessness. We seek to empower people experiencing homelessness and poverty, whose perspectives are often excluded from the development of policies and politics. We do this through protest, education, positive policy change, and reform. As a part of our annual You Don't Need a Home to Vote campaign, we are interviewing candidates running for state, local, and federal offices on the issues that are important to us in our community. Today, we're talking with Lisa Savage, who is running for U.S. Senate to represent Maine. And Ben, go ahead with the first question.
Hi, could you please introduce yourself to the voters and tell us why you decided to run for the U.S. Senate?
Sure. Thank you, Ben, for that question. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for having me and taking the time to hear about my campaign. I'm Lisa Savage. I'm running for the U.S. Senate seat currently held by Susan Collins. It's a ranked choice voting election. I'm on the ballot as an independent. I started out as a Green. I was a member of the Green Party when I first tried to get ballot access, but the laws in Maine are written in such a way that it's almost impossible for third-party candidates to gain ballot access. So when that became evident, I unenrolled from the Green Party, and we collected enough signatures in one day on Super Tuesday. We collected over 9,000 signatures, only needed 4,000 for ballot access. I say all that as a way of contextualizing it when I say my platform didn't change, my values didn't change. I'm still just as Green at heart as I ever was. And my intention is to re-enroll as a Green after I win the election. So I've just retired from 25 years of teaching school in Central Maine. I live up in the 2nd District. I live in Solon, Maine. I'm married to a self-employed woodworker. We have 5 grown-up children and 5 grandchildren. Very few of my family, my extended family, live in Maine because Maine is economically depressed chronically, and most of the children have a lot of student debt, so they live in other places with more high-paying jobs. Before I became a school teacher, I owned a restaurant in Skowhegan, Maine for several years. It was a family business. My dad died suddenly and left us a family business. I have experience as an elected union official in that I was vice president, chief negotiator for the teachers' local bargaining unit of the Maine Education Association for several years. I don't have any experience, though, taking money from corporate lobbyists or corporate executives or super PACs that launder corporate money so candidates can take it while claiming they don't. And I don't have any experience writing legislation to represent the interests of wealthy people who've given me money to get elected. This is a grassroots campaign. We do have some paid staff. Most of it runs on volunteer power and grassroots donations from regular people. So we are not just trying to move the conversation left, we are trying to win the election. And I actually believe with ranked choice voting in place that it is possible that I could win. We've had 2 debates so far. I've gotten very positive feedback after each debate, lots of donations, lots of new volunteers. You can watch those debates. They're both recorded online. And I could share the links for that if you'd like. But primarily, my platform that I'm running on is Medicare for all, first and foremost, universal single-payer healthcare. In a pandemic, it is unbelievable to me that I am the only candidate supporting universal health care. It could be because I'm the only non-millionaire in this race. The others are all multimillionaires and that are on the ballot. And but I really believe that healthcare is a human right, that many of our economic problems as individuals and as small business owners are stem from the ridiculously high cost of healthcare and the fact that many people don't have access to it. If you ask me, what is my motivation to do this? I would say the families of the children I've been working with as a school teacher for these many years, a lot of the children had health care through MaineCare, but many of the adults in the family did not, almost no one had dental care, adequate dental care. And I watch people that even if they have housing, even if they have a job, even if they have a vehicle to get there, they were just barely hanging on economically long before the pandemic came along. And I don't think that's fair that people are penalized for being poor and deprived of a basic human right that our society would benefit from, everyone having complete access to good healthcare. So that's my number one policy. And then the other one is a demilitarized Green New Deal, by which I mean defund the Pentagon in share of the federal budget each and every year, and instead fund a good jobs program, creating union jobs, full benefit, full-time union jobs, building solutions to climate crisis, or at least systems that would mitigate climate crisis, rather than building weapon systems here in Maine. It would be a double win for climate, because weapon systems are hugely polluting. So if you stop building them, that's one win for climate. And then if you build something like a light rail passenger train system for Maine so that we could get around without our cars, that would be a second win for climate. Or clean energy systems such as solar power or offshore wind. The Green New Deal, as the Green Party conceived it, and then the Democratic Party kind of latched onto it and watered it down. But the original Green New Deal is the one that I support. It also includes regenerative agriculture, so investing in our...
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, and then we'll move on to the next question, but sorry.
Okay, yeah. Regenerative agriculture and consumer-owned and operated utilities. Electricity, internet, and water supplies should be consumer-owned, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Sherry, you're next.
Would you like me to go, Anna?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I thought you could hear me say that. I thought you were next.
Oh,
but...
no, I didn't. I was like, I'm sorry.
Please go, please go.
I hope anything that I'm asking you isn't redundant, but I remember you from the debates, and I'm only on the phone, so I'm putting a face to the voice, and I'm glad, because now it's a little more personable. I know firsthand that the social safety net in our country is unable to meet current needs. I live on disability, SSI, and food pantries. Everything is strained, especially with COVID. So the government social services, they're all dealing with less than available funding for their vital life saving support program, their vital life saving programs. What would your solution be for rebuilding the social safety net?
Thank you for that question. Oh, sorry, thought you were done.
Oh, no, that was just the end of it. How do we get back?
Yes. How do we get back to where we used to be, which was barely adequate, but at least better than where we are? Thank you for that question. It's super important to me. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We are wasting most of our wealth on military programs, which are essentially corporate welfare for already very, very wealthy corporations. So that's the first place I would look, as I mentioned. The second place I would look is having rich people pay their fair share of taxes. I paid more than the president did last year. I think many of us did. And I'm a school teacher married to a self-employed woodworker. We see that, billionaires like Jeff Bezos became trillionaires under the pandemic. They are not paying their fair share of taxes. And if we would do those two things, I believe that we could easily afford to reinstate social safety nets, such as housing as a guaranteed right, good medical care as a guaranteed right, fully funding education, and also, funding mental health services. My Medicare for All plan would include mental health, hearing, vision, and dental, which currently Medicare does not include, but it should be a complete and comprehensive medical care program. And I think the funding is there. Budgets are moral documents. We just have bad budget priorities in this country. There's really no shortage of funding.
Jim, you have the next question.
Yeah. Well, advocates with Homeless Voices of Justice have all experienced homelessness Most of my life, my work as an electrician allowed me to provide housing for myself. But due to my struggle with alcoholism, I became homeless. I haven't had a drink for 12 years now, so I'm managing well with that. But I've seen a lot of places shut down because of lack of funding. One place in Portland called Serenity House was shut down that I stayed at for a while. So do you have any plans to make recovery services more available to low-income and homeless people?
Thanks for that question. James, I think that we met during Occupy. I know that, I can't remember exactly when we met, but I know that we've been out on the pavement together for a few years. And I do very much believe that recovery services would be in some ways part of a medical plan. Medicare for All, if it wrapped around mental health services, would also include harm reduction, substance use disorder treatment, like it's a medical issue, which it is. And even though this is a bit of a side issue, not criminalizing substance use disorder, because it certainly isn't appropriately a criminal issue. But I do think that, of course, supportive housing, fully staffed programs that help people get sober and stay sober. I'm not a believer in, oh, well, then we'll provide housing. It seems to me that housing first has worked where it's been used, and that people are often able to get sober and stay sober if that is their choice, once they're more secure and safe and can count on being housed. So again, the funding is there, I believe. It's a matter of priorities, and I can't really think of anything that would be higher priority than helping people that want to address their substance use disorder and get sober and stay sober. So I'm impressed with your ability to do that with a lot of those programs missing. And, hopefully in the future, things will be better funded to really help people that want to, improve their lives and get out from under an addiction that they're struggling with. Mm-hmm.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Like many others, I rely on my SNAP benefits to buy food. I used to receive the full SNAP benefit, $193 a month. However, due to state restrictions on who can receive SNAP, and my benefits were cut to a minimum of $16 a month for a while. That isn't even enough to buy a can of soup a day. Over the last several months, the U.S. Senate has debated whether to increase maximum SNAP benefits by 15% over the cost of living and raise the minimum SNAP benefit from $16 to $30. Meanwhile, Americans are going hungry. What will you do to expand SNAP funding, reduce barriers, and make it more accessible for all who need it?
Thank you for that question. I think that the SNAP benefits is a perfect example of why, when we send millionaires to Congress to represent the needs of the people, they don't do a good job, because millionaires have no idea what regular working people or retired people or disabled people in Maine are struggling with. They have no idea. But as a school teacher in a low-income part of Maine for many years, I realized that food insecurity is a huge issue here in Maine, and that even a minimum SNAP benefit of $30 a month, that's a ridiculously low minimum. So I would definitely, I'm sorry, what?
I said it buys a can of soup a day.
It buys a can of soup a day. I'm seeing statistics that many more children are experiencing food insecurity since the pandemic hit. I know that 1 in 4 workers lost their jobs in Maine when the pandemic hit. But aside from children, aside from workers, there's no reason to not fully fund SNAP, except that for some reason, wealthy people in this country think that we should be punishing poverty as if it were, as if that would help people cope with their daily needs and get on with their life. I don't believe anyone chooses poverty, and that if people are at a stage in life where they're dependent on SNAP benefits, we should be fully funding them. I don't mind telling you, I've got food stamps a long, long time ago when they were so-called food stamps and not SNAP. because I had just started out of high school trying to, earn a living and live in an apartment in California, and I couldn't afford food, so I applied for food stamps. I don't understand why we keep dialing back these programs instead of fully funding them. I would like to bring a much more humane set of priorities to the U.S. Senate than I see operating there now.
Thank you.
Ben, you have the next question.
Yeah. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen different levels of government take several steps to protect renters, including banning evictions and developing rental systems. Do you believe that the federal government should continue to take steps to protect renters from eviction? If so, what should be done?
Yes, definitely. I think that Congress has failed to relieve renters in any meaningful way yet. The eviction freeze or a freeze due doesn't really solve the problem. It just kicks the can down the road. And I think the pandemic looks to be a pretty long public health crisis. So really meaningful direct payments to renters so that they can pay their rent and not fall behind are extremely important. I've been calling for that since the beginning of the pandemic. Meanwhile, Congress has bailed out corporations and banks and cruise ships and airlines several times. The wealthy people got lots of relief, but we can't get relief to someone that's living in a one-bedroom apartment. I think that again, our priorities are messed up. We definitely provide rent relief, and really small-time landlords, like people that own one or two units that they rent out, they probably would benefit as much from rent relief as their tenants, because they may fall into arrears on the mortgage that they have on the building and not be able to pay the rent. So definitely think the eviction freeze should stay in place. It's not a time. At the beginning of the pandemic, when they said just stay home, I was like, what about people who are unhoused? That's just cruel to tell them to just stay home. So keeping everyone who already is housed is, I believe, should be a big priority for the federal government during the pandemic.
Riley, do you want to take the next question?
Yes. So this question is about racial inequity. Mm-hmm. Both COVID-19 and police brutality have shown us that we need to focus on systemic racism in this country. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are overrepresented in both homelessness and poverty right here in Maine. What will you do to dismantle systemic racism within social services, and how will you prioritize the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents?
Thank you for that question. I think in general, the best way to prioritize the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color is to have them at the table, rather than me as a white person of considerable economic, middle-class privilege, deciding what would fix that. Definitely need to listen to diverse voices and the voices of impacted communities to find out from them what would help. Of course, I'm aware of the call to defund the police and invest in our communities. I support that 100%. I think that the police are often called for to respond to things that an armed person bristling with weapons is not the right person to call. If we had especially mental health crisis workers that were trained to de-escalate situations, that were trained to not use violence to respond to a call where a family member says, my brother's having a psychotic break, he's running in the street, please help me. Also, police are often called to settle community disputes, that a trained community mediator would be a much better person to call. And I do think that decriminalizing drugs, I do not believe that the possession or use or even sale of drugs should be a criminal matter. I think that would go partway toward addressing some of the racial discrepancies in our incarcerations. People of color don't use drugs at any greater rate than white people, but they sure get busted a lot more often and jailed. So that would help. And really, Medicare for All, I think, would be a huge step forward in providing full access to medical care for absolutely everyone who resides in the U.S. I wouldn't limit it to citizens. Our healthcare, our public health care is only as good as everyone's public health care. And I think that the discrepancies in COVID rates in Maine are among the worst in the nation in terms of percentage of the population that is, I know I've seen it for the statistics for Black people, and percentage of the COVID infection cases that are Black people. I would imagine that addressing underlying issues of unequal access to health care so that people have underlying conditions that aren't really being properly treated when they get the infection would help with that. I also think that just underlying issues of poverty make it more likely that people of Black and Indigenous people of color are working in frontline service jobs. They can't be done from home. They can't be done with social distancing. And that probably puts, has put them more in the way of catching the infection. So it's a complicated problem that manifests in many ways. But I do think that addressing poverty and poverty and healthcare and policing would probably be the three big ones that I would start with.
And Cher, I think you have the last question.
Participation in our democratic process is incredibly hard for people experiencing homelessness and poverty, and a little bit harder for everyone these days. If elected, how will you maintain accountability to your unhoused constituents and the constituents experiencing poverty?
Thank you for that question. Well, I am aware that Preble Street has done a lot of good work over the years supporting the voting rights, supporting voting access for people that are experiencing homelessness or have recently experienced homelessness. So I certainly think working through community organizations that have a track record on this issue is important. Again, I don't have any experience taking money from corporate lobbyists and writing bills for them. If elected to the U.S. Senate, my constituents are the people of Maine, and that includes the most vulnerable people. And I would work very hard to meet regularly with people, actual constituents, so that I could hear from them about how government policies impact them, what their unmet needs are, and their recommendations for better policies. People sometimes ask a somewhat silly question. First day in the Senate, what would you do? Like find the bathroom, thank the people that are supporting me. But jokingly, I sometimes say, call Bernie and meet with Maine people in Maine that are visiting in Washington, D.C. I realize that many people economically cannot visit Washington, D.C. I think we have teleconferencing now, everybody video conferences. And when riding the train back and forth to Maine, I would make it a priority to meet with not just people with money, because if I get elected, it's a 6-year term. I'll tell you honestly, I have no interest in getting reelected. I would focus on being the best senator for the people of Maine, all the people of Maine that I could be for 6 years. When I was a school teacher, I always thought, if I'm not a good teacher to every child in my class, then I'm not a good teacher. So it may be more challenging to hear from and respond to the needs of our more marginalized communities, but I think it's super important. And I will commit to doing the best job that I can do to hear from and respond to our, communities that are usually left. Nobody invites them to the table, and if they're at the table, they kind of don't listen to them. I think that's a big mistake. I think that we get a lot smarter the more people, listening and talking with each other about how to solve our collective problems.
Well, thank you, Lisa Savage, for taking time to speak with us today. We're
Sure.
excited to share your answers with our community, and we wish you luck.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.